It's okay to be attracted to the feminine because we are presenting ourselves in a very feminine way. So what I'm trying to do is give a plea out to those men who feel so emasculated and duped to say, you weren't attracted to the biology of me. You were attracted to the physicality and femininity I was exhibiting.
Yes.
So, of course, if you are a man who loves women and you see a pretty girl and you want to hit that girl up at the bar and buy them a drink, that is no different than any other day.
Right.
The problem is, as soon as you realize it's like, oh, shit, that's a man under there, like Mike Myers says, that's a man, baby. It's like, it's like understanding that all of a sudden they realize, oh my God, that means I was also attracted to the man. No, it just means you're attracted to their femininity. And there's nothing wrong with that as a healthy human.
Welcome back. We are on today with my guest Savannah Hauk on the Tour for This Shit podcast. I'm your host, Angie Sorensen. And obviously, if you like the show, please give it a 5-star rating or leave it a review. You can tell your friends, subscribe on the app that you're listening from. The more you do that, the more it helps new listeners discover this show. I'll be so grateful for that. It does actually mean a lot and it makes a difference. So I just want to say before I introduce the guest of the week is that I've actually realized that I've been using an expression wrong, completely wrong, as in like the actual opposite of what it means for the whole entire duration of this podcast. Not this episode, the podcast itself. So for the last 2 years, I've been using this expression wrong. And the expression is, I've kept saying, oh, I can bring the house down. And what I meant was completely different. So basically, usually the context you would hear me saying it would be, saying basically I don't like conflicts in any relationships. But if the person pushes me enough, I can totally bring the house down. But that's not what I meant. Well, that's what I thought I meant. But it's not. I don't mean it's funny. I don't mean I'm making them laugh. I definitely do not make anybody laugh when I'm angry. So, but I guess I was really confusing it with, burn the house down, figuratively. I'm not out there burning houses. So, yeah, so basically I can bring the fight to the fact. The fight to the fight. So that's what I meant. But, I decided to leave it there. And it's probably definitely not the only expressions I've used wrong. So there you go. But, listen, if you could actually laugh at that when you hear me say that, then I guess I've brought one house down. So in today's episode with Savannah Hauk, Savannah has 2 lives, one with a job in IT as Chuck and another one as an author, podcaster, advocate and spokesperson for Crossdresser and the non-binary community. Savannah is a crossdresser herself, and today she will take us into her world of crossdressing and dual gender. So without further ado, help me give a big warm welcome to Savannah. Let's begin. Well, welcome, Savannah.
Hello, welcome. I'm feeling very happy. I was just saying I'm very happy to be here. I'm very excited to work with you and be on your podcast.
Now, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to have you on as well, because we're going to talk about things I've actually been wanting to talk for a little while, but it hasn't been easy for me to sort of identify the right person to come on and talk about those things, with the style of the podcast. So I'm really glad that you said yes. And so, today we're going to talk about clarifying the conversation around gender identity, cross-dressing, and sort of misinformation around what gender is, the similarities and the differences between the sexes from your point of view, Savannah. And obviously I'll pipe in as well. I can't help myself. But so before we dive in, please introduce yourself, where you live and what you do.
Oh, of course. Well, my day job, I work in kind of an IT website development role. But that's not my passion. My passion is my books. I'm a writer. I'm an advocate for cross-dressers and non-binary folk. I have my own podcast with a co-host called The Fox and the Phoenix. So social media. So basically, I've lived two completely separate lives, which is actually pretty indicative of a cross-dresser's life. Yeah, there's like, I have the job that pays my bills, and I have everything else that I do to try to foster everything you just mentioned. How do we clarify the conversation around cross-dressers and cross-dressing, and what does it mean, and kind of get rid of the stigma around it. I'm coming out of the United States. So it's early for me, a little bit later for you,
Yes.
this podcast episode, but I'm happy to be here. And so I'm in the South. I'm in the Southeast, so South Carolina of the United States.
And so you mentioned about two separate lives. Do you still feel like you're living two separate lives?
Yes and no. This gets a lot deeper into the conversation. It's like, there's two separate personas. I have my male persona, which is my birth persona, and I have Savannah, who is my feminine persona. So those are two separate entities. They have two completely separate presentations. I will not leave the house like androgynously. I either, show up as male or as I show up as female in my presentation. So for me, the fact that not everybody knows about Savannah. I mean, there is a huge swath of people in social media and in my advocacy, and people have read the book, who know Savannah but do not know Chuck. And so they're in my family, the majority of my family and my friends and neighbors know Chuck and not Savannah. So in that way specifically, yes, they are really two distinct lives.
Do you know, I actually love it that your other persona, that other people know you as Chuck, because Chuck, the first thing I would never think, and that's again, that's probably like sort of my my misconception of things. But, when you hear Chuck, you don't literally think cross-dressing, right? So I think that's even more beautiful. That's even greater. So, I guess before we go into sort of like, what really is cross-dressing and maybe like what does dual gender mean to you? Because I know that's something we're going to talk about.
Sure.
Could you maybe sort of... could you tell us a little bit how you got into, like, how did you find out? Like, I know that's not something, I didn't realize I was going to ask you this, so you don't have to answer this, but I realized I didn't mention this prior, but would you mind sort of telling us could you summarize a little bit, like, what was that journey to today? Like, how did you get into cross-dressing? How did you become aware of those two different personas and, how did that happen?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, this journey that I'm going to speak about is very specific to me. And again, though many people may have this resonate with them, but some people don't come to cross-dressing till the age of 50 and never think about it, never thought about it. And then all of a sudden that door opens for them and they're like, oh my God, I think this is something, that is for me, that speaks to me in my heart. For me, I was 5 to 7 years old, where I finally found, not finally, but I kind of discovered this attraction to feminine clothing. Like my mom would, fold clothes on the bed in her bedroom and kind of be putting stuff away. And I just had this need, this want, this pull to like explore that material, to explore how it would look on me and how it would feel on me. And so this is at a very early age, prepubescent age of discovery of like, oh, this is something that speaks to me in some way. So the idea of it, not even knowing what it meant, not knowing what the words were, not being able to give it like an identity or a category, I just knew that it was something I was really interested in. It could probably be no different than a young boy who puts on his sister's Disney dress, and it's like, and thinks that's cute and fun and parades around. But for me, it was never like this, oh, this is a cute thing I did and then took it off and never thought about it again. This was kind of an increasingly more important thing as I got into my teenage years and got into my 20s. And while I kept it very much to myself because I kind of knew it was not something you would tell your parents about for some reason. I kind of have a self-preservation about that. It wasn't until my 20s when I moved from the Midwest to New York City where I actually found so many people who were so diverse, and drag queens working in like restaurants and going to clubs and seeing people in all form of androgyny and sexuality, that I really accepted the term crossdresser because that's a word that at the time in the 90s seemed to be the best fit. And then that's at that point, once I made that declaration to myself, that's when Savannah physically became like a full-on head-to-toe presentation.
Yeah, no, you know, it's interesting because I love how you said about how when you were, you know, I guess like your first memory of it when you were like around 5 to 7 years old and you saw your mother's clothes and you were like, you had this, you were drawn to just putting it on and you just really loved the clothes. And I think, you know, and you said, you know, you didn't have the word for it, you didn't understand what it was because, you know, when you were 5 to 7. And I was thinking, yeah, when I was a kid, you know, I wanted to have little cars. I was playing with cars, you know, I wasn't into the Barbie dolls. And I was into My Little Pony because I love horses. But, you know, and teddy bears, but I just wasn't into Barbies at all. I wasn't into like, oh, you know, wearing pretty dresses and things like that. I mean, I had like a nice fun skirt, but I was into cars. And that's I remember till this day. My favorite one was a little red one. And, you know, that was like my thing. And you don't think about it. And it was never questioned in my family either. It was just like, you know, well, she likes what she likes, whatever. You know, it's like, so I think there has to be this freedom when we're children as well, right? To just, you know, we don't have to have words. And so I thought that was quite beautiful that, you know, that you said like you didn't have the words because I don't think we need to necessarily, unless we have them, obviously. But I before I go into, there's a couple of things you said and I wanted to dive into that. But before we go on, and I should have asked this up top because it is a dating podcast. Would you mind telling us what your status is?
I am in a relationship long term with my girlfriend. She has known from the beginning that Savannah, who was part of who I was. We worked together, and so we got close, and we kind of like hit that moment of, hey, this is going in a completely different way, in a lot more romantic way. So that was when many of us cross-dressers will pull out the old phone in the photos and say, hey, can you sit on the couch with me? I need to show you something.
Yeah.
And then you scroll, and she's sitting there going, all right, what's the deal? What are we waiting for here? And you're trying to find that perfect picture of you as your femme self. And that's when I said, hey, this is part of who I am. And she was shocked. I mean, she didn't know what to do with it. She also had never, this is like with many spouses or partners or girlfriends of a cross-dressing man, is that they haven't ever come across this thing. They don't know what to make of it. It's like, so you typically get one of 3 questions when you get, like, you reveal yourself. It's like, okay, so that's like being a drag queen, right? And it's like, no, it's not a performance. It's not, you know, something I do to entertain you. It is part of me. It's like, oh, so you're gay. You're right. You're gay because you want to be a woman. So therefore you're gay. No, I'm not. I'm straight. I'm a heteronormative person. And I still love women. And then the third thing people, spouses or partners will usually ask is, does that mean you want to transition? You know, you want to dress as a woman, so that must mean you want to be a woman. And this is where it gets very, very confusing and that's why I call myself dual gender, because I love my birth biology. I love being a man, but I also love being a woman. And I put a lot of care and effort into the becoming of Savannah because I want to be able to go out in the world and blend in and just kind of live that life as well.
Yes, yeah. Is it because I guess it must be such a different experience as well, right? I mean, I don't know because I've never. I actually like to try not to, and obviously this is not to diminish your experience whatsoever. But I actually wonder what it would feel like to walk around as a man. You know, it would be a different experience, you know, how people approach me and look at me. And I guess there's this other layer if they also realize that I am actually a female body underneath being a man. I mean, it is add a whole other layer, right? Which also makes sense that why New York City was probably the place where you felt the most comfortable to express yourself and fully become who you are, you know, in every single meaning of the word. You know, there's a beautiful nuances. I love that you mentioned about, you know, cross-dressing and drag is different. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're gay. It does not necessarily mean that you are wanting to transition. It just is a nuance, right? So to me, that's how I heard it. It's like there's so many nuances in life now, there's always been, but now we're sort of more aware of it. And so I definitely want to go into that dual gender in a little bit.
Sure.
But just for clarification, so is your girlfriend, so from what I could hear, I'm sort of assuming, but I may be wrong, that she's a cisgender woman. So like me,
Yes.
born in a female body, and she's happy with the assignment of her female sex.
That is absolutely right. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because those questions makes it sort of makes sense because that was the questions that I would be asking. Right. So I was like, okay, yeah, that sort of like makes sense. So I wanted to ask, because you brought up the word dual gender. Now
Yes.
I hadn't heard that term until you mentioned it when we were emailing. And because for me, I've heard of bigender, or non-binary, all of the things. And I was just wondering, I just wanted to start off first, like, what does dual gender mean to you?
Probably pretty much what you think bigender means to you. It's just another term that we're constantly evolving and changing in the community, in the LGBTQ community, to further refine the meaning of things. So for me, if you say this is kind of like my new thing. I said, hey, let me ask you a riddle. What do drag queens, gender nonconforming, non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid, bigender, dual gender, and transitioning folk all have in common?
What they have in common? Well, actually,
What do they all have in common? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I only have, like, from a personal point of view, I always feel like that anyone, under those sort of, I guess, like those labels, if you like, I always feel like they're probably like more evolved than I am. I don't know. Like, that's my feeling. It's not to say that other people are not evolved. I think we can call evolved in our sensitivities. But I think for me, what they have in common is they have and it may not be the answer you're looking for here, but what they have in common is they have the courage that many people lack, because it demands a lot of courage to come out and assert ourselves, and for one, but the other part is also to actually have this awareness of what's going on for oneself, right? So, but what do they have in common? I guess it's almost like, well, I don't know. I guess it's transcending what society is imposing, right? It's like trying to remove ourselves from the conditioning, whether it is the right thing or not the right thing. I don't know, but it's definitely.
I'll tell you, your answer is way better than mine. But by the way, I'm just letting you know.
Oh, I want
yours
the point.
Is way more insightful than mine.
Or just 1-0 to Angie. Okay.
I mean, because mine was a very simplistic answer, but your answer is so deep and meaningful and so true. My answer is that all these people who have this label of all those things I mentioned have or had used cross-dressing, which is an art form. Cross-dressing is an art form. Cross-dressing is not an identity. And that's the thing that a lot of people misunderstand. You say, I'm a cross-dresser, and all of a sudden everybody's like, oh my God, stigma. I don't know what to do with all this word you just gave me. It's so filled with slur and hate. So the point I was making, again, yours is much better. The point I was making is that all these people, from drag to a dual gender or non-binary to somebody who is transitioning, have or has used the art form of cross-dressing at some point in their life to express all that stuff you just said, to be enlightened, to be non-conforming, to expand the idea of their self in a way in their presentation that you can't just do. It's like, well, I'm biologically this. In order to present myself differently or otherly than the norm, the social norm, I have to use a method of cross-dressing to achieve it.
Of course.
And so that's what a lot of people don't understand. That they hear the word cross-dresser and they think very specific things, which is why I'm trying to not divorce myself from the term, but really say, no, cross-dressing is the way I do it, but dual gender is who I am.
And so when you say that, does that mean that you feel, when you say dual gender is who I am, does that mean that you feel both male and female?
I think I'm have a pretty good amalgam at this point in life. I mean, I'm hitting middle age, if I haven't already. Just FYI, just between you and me.
I won't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody, please.
I'm 42 and I do not want to become middle-aged. I'm like, fuck that for now.
Well, I'll tell you what, I just hit 50, so I'm officially at the midway point. That's only if I reach 100. But for now, I've done so much work, like I said, between those mid-90s when I finally recognized and said, I am Savannah, this is my name. And to now, it has been a constant series of self-evaluations, of asking myself the questions of like, who do I like? What's my sexuality? Do I want to transition? And the answers are always the same, but if you never revisit it, you just kind of assume without evolving. So for me, I've taken, to answer your question, I'm going a long way around to answer your question, but the answer to the question is, I am not two wholly separate people. I am not wholly masculine, and then all of a sudden I put on a cape and I become wholly feminine. I'm pretty much kind of enmeshed. I feel that my personality, you will get the same conversation with me today as you would if you saw me on the street as Savannah or if you saw me as Chuck. You're going to get the same thing. My intellect is the same. My compassion and empathy is the same. The only difference is that the clothing allows you to kind of nuance yourself in a physical way. Like as a woman, you can touch somebody on the arm more readily. You can, you're more free to have, a little more physical interaction with other women or even with some men versus like two men hugging. Oh my God, that'd be horrendous. So you get allowances. And you're softer. You can move your hands more, and you're.
This is so true. Oh, sorry, Kat. I'm interrupting you. But when you were saying that just really reminded me, and I really miss those days. But in my 20s, when I used to go out a lot, and I used to on the Wednesdays. There's this place in London called Heaven, and it's I guess like it's a gay club, but like the Wednesdays was like where you'd see. I think it's almost. I don't know if they were opening up to like people who weren't necessarily gay, but it was definitely like the night where industry people like who worked in club and restaurants, which is what I did at the time, would go. And I mean, I don't, it's like, the bathroom, you'd have the drag queens in there. We all know they were like, in the daytime, they were like a male body, right? But like, that's like, it was fun. It was good. Like, there's no like, but if it was like a man dressed as a man, it'd be like, get out of here, right? But because it was like a drag queen, we'd be like, and just like having fun. Everyone was like very drunk in London. So
that probably helps a little too.
Yeah. But it's just like, and that's slapping their butt. I was very naughty. But it's just there's that thing. It's true. Like it's sort of brings a different, and I do understand that cross-dressing and drag queen is very different, because often like the drag queen, I guess like my experience of it, and it's not a lot at all, and it's also dating now. It's going back now almost 20, between 15 to 20 years, so things have changed, I'm sure, but it's just like drag queens tend to also have like a persona. It's like how do you call it? Like a pseudo persona. There's a word for it.
That's a good word for it. Yeah.
And it's sort of like, which is part of it, right? Which is part of the appeal and the fun. But then you have cross dressing whilst going down the supermarket. It's very different experience, I think, right? Yeah. So, and it's not necessarily putting on a show. It's just I just want to wear this, and that's how. So I think, when you were talking about cross-dressing as being the common denominator, there's also this bit around being and what's it? How do you pronounce this? Thank you. Yeah, because that's different. That's not the same at all, right? Because like, I think to me, like I love. If I had the money, I'd buy both very feminine clothes, but also I can't say the word. How do you say it?
Androgynous.
Thank you. Style. Clothes. I think like a beautiful black Armani suit is so hot on a woman. Like that's what, like, I think it is very sexy, right? So like, I like to play around those things. And in fact, I love bow ties and
So basically like what you're saying...
But I don't see that as cross-dressing. It's just an expression of where I'm at and playing with sensuality without having to necessarily showing legs every time. Sometimes I want to show legs. Sometimes I want to show cleavage. Sometimes I don't. I want you to guess. And that's just part of play, right? It's not... I don't see it as changing... It's an expression.
You're not adding the persona. Right. You don't have another name. You don't have like Alan is my, my Armani suit name.
Exactly. It doesn't change about how I feel about my sex, my gender, or my orientation. It's just how I like to express myself. Yes, how I'm feeling in the day.
And I may be truly dating myself at this point, but that's very Annie Lennox of you.
I love Annie Lennox
because she was amazing. She was
Great
actually,
voice.
yes, that too. But like where the Madonna was the uber feminine, and really took that persona to that like nth degree of sexuality, which was freeing in and of itself. But Annie Lennox did the same thing with dress and with like I am a beautiful woman, I have these gorgeous eyes, this beautiful hair, but I'm going to dress in this very androgynous suit and still have that come off as being very attractive.
Exactly. Yeah, because sensuality and sexuality is not necessarily what you wear. It's an energy, right?
It is. Really it is. And that goes back to those drag queens in the bathroom you were talking about, where it's like you're slapping asses and having a good time. It's about the energy. It's so much about the spirituality and the energy. The clothing evokes. Like I always say that clothing gives you power, but also you give power to clothing.
Yes.
And for somebody like me, I can put on a dress and it empowers me. It's like a shield. It's like armor. But it's also freeing because I can imbue that clothing with like my femininity and my sensuality. And so, it's kind of like this play, even just within yourself and not even within a crowd, but having that energy of self of like, this allows me to kind of like just enhance my inherent femininity in a way that I can now take that out to the world and I'm going to the coffee shop. I'm going to sit outside, on a veranda and type on my computer. Or I'm going to go to the store and I'm just living this life in this feminine energy. Yeah. And that's in a lot of ways, that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be. I mean, I have a feminine persona because it's a necessity because I don't want to be misgendered, mislabeled by somebody calling me Chuck. When I'm out in the world. So the identity is a shell, but and it's not like, oh no, I become Savannah and my head changes and my brain chemistry and now I'm thinking different. No, it's just a way to say this is the wholeness of that femininity that I'm trying to display and exhibit and express. Yeah.
Well, it's like anything. We all need to, and when I say transition, I don't talk about transition like for transgender or transitioning sex. I mean, like we all need to transition, like let's say, and I'm taking it at this basic meaning of the term is like, well, let's say if you come home from work, you need to transition, you need to land. I mean, I'm like that. I need to land. So I need to like take off my bra, I need to make a cup of tea, or I may need to pour myself a glass of wine. I need to transition. I need to land, right? I need to land somewhere. Right. And I guess maybe part of having that, being Savannah at that moment, wearing the heels or the skirt or whatever it is that you wear as Savannah, it's also, it's that time that you transition into that place. You need to land almost,
Oh, yeah. It's
translated also externally. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas you're coming from the office and you have to wear a blazer and a skirt and pumps. And you come home and you're like you said, bras flung off, either through the armhole. You get out of that and get into, you throw off the heels and you put on your flats or just your sneakers and your yoga pants and your big oversized hoodie. And you're like, And that exact feeling in reverse is me becoming Savannah. There's I told you before the podcast, it takes me 90 minutes, give or take, to become Savannah. And a lot of that is just the ritual of shaving and the ritual of doing the makeup and the moisturizing and putting on the shapewear and putting on the padding. And it becomes like this very ritualistic thing that helps you to kind of tap into it. And once you're done and you put the wig on and you're like, oh yeah, Savannah's here.
And we all cross-dress in terms if you, let's say people who have to wear uniform for work, whether it's a nurse, police officer, fire, they all have to put it on, right? And then they get into the work mode. It's that transition, you're landing into it, right? I mean, I wouldn't trust a fireman if he arrives and he's like, wearing, he's still wearing his yoga pants and he's got, and he's just shirtless. I'm like, you're not ready to jump into this building on fire. This is not going to happen. I don't see it, so yeah. And so I've got, I'm aware that I did actually interrupt you and I'm not sure at what point.
It's all good. I know I wanted to make a comment on something you said about you would always want to know what it would be like to be like, dress as a man, and then not knowing you were a female. And I thought that was very interesting on 2 points. One, because we covered the Annie Lennox thing about that it is so much more appropriate and accepted for a woman to dress in very androgynous or masculine ways.
Correct.
Like you're not typically chastised for that unless you get very assertive and now you're a bitch. Right?
Right, yeah.
Then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, why are you trying to be all like a man? It's like, if it's a man doing it, that's aggressive. If a woman's doing it, that's a bitch. And that's an unfortunate double standard. But it is so accepted for women to wear jeans and sneakers and button-down shirts and a suit. Even though it may be cut for a woman, it's still very masculine and kind of it's what it's saying. And so I'm very actually happy that women have spent years and years and decades and centuries getting to a point where they can be accepted to wear whatever they want to wear and not have it affect who they are as a person. You don't need a separate persona, right? So for you to like, I'm going to walk around with a mustache and see how people react to me. I think that would be very interesting and amazing to see that change of how people see you.
I think I almost want to feel like what it's like to walk around and actually, I would actually go full on. I'd probably buy a strap-on, but it'd have to be a strap-on that actually can be flaccid because you can't walk around with you don't want tents. I don't want to look like a camping site walking camping site. But wear that because I bet there's something about it that you have that. Because it's like an external plumbing, right? Ours is internal, yours is external, like men are external. So it's like walking around and just be like, hey, I'm the guy. Because even, you mentioned about someone being assertive, like the man or, or having an opinion, like the woman is a bitch, the guy is, you said aggressive. But actually, often the guy that in my experience, they're not even being taught aggressive. They just say, oh, he's the guy, he's the dude, he knows what he wants, he's very clear. And the woman, for the woman, it's like, she's so opinionated, she's so abrupt. And it's like, oh, gosh. But, it's going to take time to transcend the things. But, and I guess we are lucky, like you said, like we can wear what we want. As women, we're not getting chastised. But again, it depends where in the world we are, right?
Yes,
so some places and certain religions as well don't allow you. And sometimes the women are happy with it, but sometimes they're not and they don't have a choice. So it's like there's so many nuances, right? But I was wondering about one of the things that sort of came up to my mind, because that's something that I often think about when I see someone cross-dressing or transitioning, and you can see, for example, when they're transitioning, you can see they still have the traits of their born gender, but they are dressing differently. You can see, because I think it depends on the country, but some places, it can be take a year or two where you have to actually act as the new gender. You have to, you have
to live that life 24/7.
You have to live that life, just to make sure that it's not something that you're going to regret. Or, I mean, I'm not a psychotherapist, but I know there are reasons why they create certain steps to make sure that everyone is understanding what's going to happen. But the one thing I think about is safety, right? Because there's a lot of people around that get triggered. There are a lot of people who get aggressive because of their triggers, and I'm just thinking the word that I wrote down was safety. Is this something that you'd like to talk about or address, in terms of as Savannah, and maybe to help for other people to think about this? It's like, is there a safety issue?
Yes, always. And like I said, I told you I'm getting to that age, and I've been Savannah kind of full on, off and on for 25 years. And it's still two things. One, yes, the matter of being mindful of where you are so that you keep yourself safe. That's number one. Number two is, even in the most benign places, I still feel fear of my safety, for my safety. Because what happened is I've got very comfortable with going to Starbucks, a coffee shop here, and I'll go to various locations on Sunday. So I have a hashtag Savannah Starbucks Sunday. So if you go to my social media or you just look that up, you'll see kind of my outings, going to places.
Yeah.
And I became very comfortable, and their mission statement is very inclusive to the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
So you knew that you were in a safe space. So my girlfriend asked me one day to go to the store and pick her up some feta cheese for dinner. which was probably 300 yards across the street from where I was sitting in the coffee shop. So I drove over saying, okay, fine, no problem. And then as soon as I got into the parking lot, I was paralyzed with fear. Because I had not ever gone into that grocery store as Savannah. I wasn't aware of their policies. I wasn't aware who might be in there. And it kind of seemed a little sordid, the sordid lot of people. And so it took me probably like 5 minutes to kind of push down that fear in my own head. And these are my own perceptions of fear. And these are my own perceptions of things that I thought could happen to me. And I got over it and got out and kind of beeline, head down, eyes forward, got to the refrigerated section of the store, got what I needed left. And other than a few stares and a guy in the checkout line who was like, hi. Then I said hi back in my normal voice. And he kind of looked me up and down and spun back around again. And that was the finish of that conversation. And that was it. And I got out of that situation. But it was a benign place that even there I felt afraid for my safety.
Yeah, and that was daytime.
That was daytime. Yeah, this was probably 2:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
It wasn't a bar in the middle of the night. It wasn't around people who have been drinking and have impaired judgment or have a phobia about, people like us. So I try not to put myself in those positions of, hey, let me go do something stupid and walk down this dark alley. I don't do that. I don't put myself in those places of fear and insecurity. But the fact that I grew up kind of without the community from day one, from an early age, that I didn't have the resources. The internet was infantile in terms of its information of who I was and what I'm supposed to be. And because I didn't know who I was, and I didn't have like a community and resources all along the line, it sometimes takes a lot of courage to like go out into the world. So the more I do it, the easier it gets. But still, at all times in terms of safety, I'm always very mindful and very self-aware of my surroundings to make sure that people are not being aggressive, or not giving me strange looks at they're pointing or grouping together in the hopes to pitchfork me out of town or something. So
this is interesting actually, because I just realized something I didn't actually I sort of like thought about, but didn't really sort of let it sink in this way, was that, when you were describing how you're feeling and the safety, that is actually how, how many, I guess, we're going to say like women or cisgender women, feel, but more like at nighttime, going home, walking home. That's it. Obviously, it's not necessarily fear of being hit, but about assault, sexual assault. So, but then I realized that it's almost like you experience when you dress as Savannah, the fear of people's, I guess like their aggression. The lack of respect, the lack of empathy, the lack of seeing a human being, the lack of, just the lack of self-control, right? Which is basically, most form of aggression, it would be like a lack of self-control, right? So that's something that, so I just realized that, because sometimes we like to say it's not the same experience, and it's different. Of course, different experience. But I think in that moment when you as an adult, as Savannah, have to think about that, it's almost like, and I know it's for some, not every woman think this way, but I have to sometimes overthink, do I really need to go down the street and get that thing? Especially during the pandemic when the streets were really quiet, right? Like for here, when it was locked down, like the streets, all of a sudden 7 p.m. could feel like the 11 p.m. or the 1 a.m. because it's so dead outside. Right, and it's like that, as the ad of like the explosion, it's like you sort of start thinking, do I really need to go and get milk down the road, or can I wait for tomorrow? And I'll wait for tomorrow. Like, and it's so that's interesting. And I just wanted to ask you, because you said now, in that store during the daytime, and that person said hello, and then you responded with your normal voice. I guess when you said that, it's like Chuck voice, right?
Yeah.
And then he looked you up and down, and then turned around. I wanted to ask you because okay, so I wanted to ask you this because like to me, I have my opinion on it, but I want to hear your, because your opinion is the one I wanted to hear, right? But so I'm gonna come across like maybe I'm gonna come across ignorant here, and that's okay. But it's like for me, I always sort of think that it's okay for people to, like, we always have to give room for people to have their own initial reaction. They may not, like it just lands on them, right? So let's say if I was to tomorrow come out as to my mom saying, hey, I'm marrying a woman, we haven't had that conversation before, right? So I've already processed it, right? I've processed it. I've come to a place where I can express it. Now, if I'm just landing it on someone, and again, this is hypothetical. I haven't said this to my mom. I don't know what she would say. She'd probably just be happy I'm getting married. I don't know. Again, we don't talk about that either. So she lets me live my life, which is quite nice. So, but I would have to have the grace to understand that she may not go, oh my God, thank goodness, or whatever. She may have her own, she may need to think about it because I just landed on her. So I cannot expect someone to have a 42-year process. That's my age. I mean, I have a 42-year process in under 2 seconds flat, right? When I'm announcing it. So that's a different example. But like, so when we arrive at the store, when you arrive at the store at Savannah, that person, they don't expect it, right? I mean, unless they're in New York City or London, you may not expect, if you're not in a big city, you may not expect this, right? So now that's how I say, I'm like, okay, well, that's okay. That guy, he didn't have an aggressive, from what I could hear, an aggressive reaction. He didn't insult you. He didn't start to give you mean looks. I don't know. I'm not. I don't have the whole information here. But let's say if he doesn't give you mean look and he's just surprised, how is that to you? Do you feel like that's okay, or is that a trigger? Is this not acceptable? Like how are we to read that?
Well, I will tell you this, Angie. It sounds like you were there because you nailed it. Number one, and you have to remember that specific episode. I was already triggered.
Yes,
I was already kind of in this frame of fear and getting over it, and kind of being kind of anxious and stressed.
You were on high alert, right?
I was on high alert, and so when I'm standing in line, even when I'm standing in line at the checkout, and the food is on a conveyor belt, and I'm standing there, and I got my stuff in my hand waiting, and he turns around, and it was very genuine. It was very southern United States. It was like, hello, very just light and bubbly, and I was very happy that he was engaged. He was an older man. And I was very like, oh, hello. And I kind of said like, oh, hello. Like, I was surprised somebody was engaging. And then, like I said, got the up and down like, oh, whoop, turned around. To your point, though, did I take offense? Only a little. Only because it is a reminder that somebody saw me as Savannah and they felt an initial reaction that made them react that way, right? Now, we all know that our initial reactions are not typically our truth. But in this case, like you said, he was surprised, wasn't expecting that. And I guess the positive is that he saw a pretty girl and wanted to say hi until he heard the voice. Not so pretty. So, and that's okay. So I took kind of solace in like, oh, he thought it was a girl. So I passed. And passing is another form of safety. Right. Because if people don't notice you, that's a good thing. But when he did engage and he turned around to, like you said, should I feel bad that he was surprised? That he wasn't expecting that, so now he wasn't really sure how to deal with it. No, it was okay. I mean, I understand that reaction, but I do hope we get to a point where that is not even a reaction.
Right, exactly.
Like that we become normalized in the world that seeing like, oh, like even if they said, oh, you're one of those dual gender people, that's fine too. As like you say, recognize and understand we exist and can be okay. That's why RuPaul's Drag Race is such a benefit because it's really normalizing drag queens in a way that, like, on an international scale, people are aware. And there may be like, wow, they're sure catty or they're really over the top or they're whatever. You can say whatever you want, but now you're aware of it. Yeah. And that's kind of my mission as an advocate is to raise the bar for both the people like me who I will tell you right now, there are people I talk to on a frequent basis that still feel they are the only ones. And I'm like, how is that possible? How is it possible that in 2021, with the internet, with, podcasting and books and social media, that we still feel that we are the only person in our world that does this thing? So until we get to the point of everybody's like, oh yeah, I know what that is. And like, they can make their own decision and like decide how they feel about it. But until the point where everybody's aware that this is an ongoing thing and it's okay, then only at that point, if somebody becomes aggressive, it's only at that point when somebody becomes aggressive that it's a bad thing. And like you said, he did not give me an aggressive stance. He just kind of wanted to disengage, and he did. He turned around, and that was kind of like, a little bit of a slap in the face, but not terrible enough for me to feel bad about it.
Okay, so two things with what you said is like, it is such a good point that you said about we like it to be more to be normalized, right? So because it's true, I think it's how every minority feels, whatever it is, whether whether it's like a mental health or like you're a minority in terms of your heritage in a specific country, whatever it is, right? Any minority always wants to can we just now stop being asked those questions? Can we please stop getting those looks? Can we please stop having to justify or explain, right? Like that is something that's very understandable. Unfortunately, it's like part of the process to get to that is that we have to go through all these, I guess like growing pains almost, right? So, so I do understand that you say like, oh, I wish that look wasn't even happening anymore, right? And that's obviously I can understand that. I totally understand that. And then on the other side, when you said, oh, he disengaged, he didn't, maybe, I don't know if I misheard you, but like he disengaged, he didn't maybe like me as a woman or, as Savannah. And I was just like, no, actually, for me, the way I see it is that, and I think this is why people get so triggered and get aggressive. Not all of them, but many of them. When they actually may go, oh, nice. And they realize, oh, what does that say about me? There's actually, there's a man underneath that, right? So sometimes it's not to do with, it has nothing to do with actually them approving or validating someone. It's got to do with, oh, wait, what does that mean? What does that mean? It's like, what does that mean for me? That's sometimes of it, because no one is really out there thinking about other people. We're all thinking about ourselves most of the time. No one is that, no one is using that much time on anyone else, really. It's kind of sad and at the same time a relief. No one's really talking that much about us. It's okay. So I think it could be one or the other, right? And
it could be. And I did say that he was an older gentleman, so I didn't really put the attraction like as part of the play. I thought it was more of like set in his ways kind of things. Like he maybe didn't approve of somebody like me, or he's never seen somebody like me. But I will tell you,
he probably doesn't know what to say. He may have 100 questions. He may want to actually take you out for dinner to ask you questions. Like take you for coffee, right? Maybe that's what he really wants, but he doesn't know how to go about it.
And I would love that. I would love that. That's why I love your show too, because you're just going to ask me whatever question, and I'm happy to answer. I mean, I wanted to really nail down that point, because we talk about, and I want to make this a point for the universe, right? We hear stories, especially within the community, and maybe not like in general, but trans women, crossdressers, drag queens being attacked. Yes. Because from men in bars that, for whatever reason. Now, typically, and this is what I've heard about, and this is what I'm kind of focusing on, it's okay to be attracted to the feminine because we are presenting ourselves in a very feminine way. So what I'm trying to do is give a plea out to those men who feel so emasculated and duped to say, you weren't attracted to the biology of me. You were attracted to the physicality and femininity I was exhibiting.
Yes.
So, of course, if you are a man who loves women and you see a pretty girl and you want to hit that girl up at the bar and buy them a drink, that is no different than any other day.
Right.
The problem is, as soon as you realize it's like, oh, shit, that's a man under there, Mike Myers says, that's a man, baby. It's like, it's like understanding that. All of a sudden they realize, oh my God, that means I was also attracted to the man. No, it just means you're attracted to their femininity. And there's nothing wrong with that as a healthy human. To be attracted to that person you're attracted to. Just because you're sexually attracted to the veneer of that person doesn't mean you're all of a sudden going to marry that person or have a romantic relationship with that person.
Yeah, it's because it's all about, it's like I would actually call it the feminine energy, right? It's like feminine and masculine energy. That's what sort of the polarity. That's what attracts. Even like in same sex, at some point one is making decision, the other one has to follow. There's like all kinds. It's not necessarily gender specific, although it's often known as that. But so, for example, I know that for me, when I've had like sort of little crushes on women, often they were like typical, like they had more of a male energy about them. They're androgynous. Can you please say it for me? Androgynous.
Androgynous.
Thank you. Androgynous. And short hair and just very masculine energy around them, you know. And so it was usually either that or they had to be like super, super feminine. But often like that masculine, it was the energy that sort of like, there was that energy about it that was like, and I thought they were good looking, obviously, right? So
yeah, there you go.
There was something about them, and so I think it is the energy, and but I think I like that you made that point. That's actually a very, very good point.
It's very important because even in the 90s when I was going to the clubs and first really finding my footing, I would see drag queens and I would see crossdressers or whoever, in all manner of feminine dress and be super, super attracted to them. And I started questioning my own sexuality because I was saying the same things that I was saying these men are saying. It's like, oh my God, I know they're men. What does that say about me? And it took me years. My second book actually has whole sections about that kind of, mutual exclusivity of what you see and are attracted to is not necessarily the person you're going to spend a lifetime with.
Right, exactly.
And I had to realize, it's like, oh, wait, so they were dressed feminine, overtly feminine, like over the top feminine, like really pumped up the femininity to like 12 on a 10 scale. And so how could you not be attracted to that if you love women?
Yeah.
And so I think it's so not counter. It's so like makes perfect sense. But because of the way we're raised, all we care about most times is like, well, they got a penis. And so that makes it icky. It's like, well, then that's all you're focused on, obviously, is the fact that they have a vagina or a penis. Maybe we should think about our relationships in broader terms.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because actually the one thing that I was like, I cannot believe this, is what I would, and I still remember, like, this is vivid in my mind, and there's been plenty of other times when it's happened where this was in Brussels, and it was on a night out, and there was this drag queen walking away, like she was in front of me, and it's a woman underneath, right? So it's a man dressed, it's a man who's a drag queen, right? So it's a male body, and I was just like, I remember I turned to my friend, I was like, this is not fair. He's got better legs than most women. better legs. Like, really. And obviously, this is really inappropriate now. This was probably in the 90s. So now we're like in 2021, this is like, we can't be like, it's almost like we're shaming other kinds of legs. But back in those days, you had to have like legs like Naomi Campbell or you didn't count, right? So, and it was like Naomi Campbell, Kate Moss kind of legs. I was like, this is insane. I was like, walking on heels on really bad pavement. I was like, how are they pulling it off? I can't barely wear. I find it hard to wear heels, So yeah, it's just like, that's the thing. You go, how, But again, and it's not like it is not an anger. It's like more like, I cannot believe this. Got better legs than us.
Well, I will tell you this. You have to remember, we do have male bodies. And therefore, I do believe we have a little bit more musculatures in the ankles to pull off heels on cobblestone.
Yeah, because it was cobblestone. Because in Brussels, it's filled with cobblestone.
Yep, there you go.
Of course, yeah.
See, the only difference is you've had your entire life to practice being in heels, so you became adept at balance. We muscle through it because we have not been living in heels our entire lives. So we muscle through it with our muscles and the ability to just kind of suck it up and suffer through.
Yeah.
Come on. You know that when you go to a wedding or reception, you throw off your heels as soon as you get to the table.
Oh my God, I take them off the minute the chance I get. Like, honestly, this is like...
And we'll keep those on. We'll keep that bra on and those heels on because we fear that if we take those off at any time during the night, that we will lose all that feminine energy we built up.
But it's different. Yeah, I guess. But it's like, this is why I need to be making tons of money so I can actually afford really like comfortable heels, because I think like apparently some of those brands out there, they're very expensive, actually apparently more comfortable. I'm like, okay, well, let's see.
I've heard that too, but I do not have that kind of bandwidth in bank account. So
same. If I was to sort of like just to, I guess I wanted to end on this note.
Do we have to? We don't have to.
No, but at some point, I guess like I want to circle back to something that. So, because you kind of actually answered this earlier, but I just wanted to like circle back to it. So, if if as a woman I'm seeing someone, or I'm in a relationship with someone, or married to someone, whatever it is, and they're a man, a cisgender man, I'm a cisgender woman, and they come to me and they reveal to me that they are cross-dressing, what is it that I need to know, or what is it that I need, so that I don't go around thinking, oh my God, does that mean that he wants to be a woman? Does that mean that, like, what is this thinking behind that I need to, or what is that I need to be aware of when someone like that comes to me with that information?
Because there's so much diversity in, again, we hear the word crossdresser, right? Or if either I'm discovered by you, my partner, or I reveal myself to you, my partner, and say, this is who I am. Okay, finally, we're coming to terms with this. There's a couple things that are going to happen. The first is that there are stages of grief based on the amount of time you spent with that person prior to this knowledge. So if you've been in a 20-year marriage and this all of a sudden becomes a known thing, it goes back to that whole conversation about the guy in the checkout, or your mom hearing about you getting married. Is that it's a shock. And you have to both come to the understanding that there's going to be a period of mourning and of shock and of a deep breath to try to wrestle with the idea of what you just heard. Now, with wrestling with what you just heard, I implore both parties to be aware of what it is and what it isn't. Because every conversation, every coupling is different. Every time somebody utters those words to a partner, it means something different. So I implore both parties to do as much conversing, as much research, as much self-analysis and reflection. Because for me, I've shared myself with my partners all along. I was married once, and that was the only relationship I did not kind of go into the relationship with that understanding of self. But since then, every relationship started with, hey, by the way, this is who I am, at whatever point of evolution I was in that relationship. Now, obviously, I've grown with it, but it's always a known factor. So I'm very self-aware of myself and where my journey is going to be and go, and how comfortable I feel here versus like, what if you wanted to transition? I'm like, you know what? If I woke up tomorrow with boobs and a great ass, I'd be okay with that. But I'm not looking to go through it medically because I like who I am right now. And I'm not saying right now in this moment, but I like who I am as a person. So the problem is, and this is kind of going to your question again, is the partner, I implore them to not race to rash judgment, to not allow any indoctrination of your belief system to weigh in on the person in front of you. Like, we all think we know what it means when it's somebody else, right? And when it's that person coming to you as your loving partner, and you're like, oh my God, why didn't you tell me 20 years ago? You're not the person I married. Well, no, they are the person you married. This is just that part of them that they were so fearful to share with you. Or even may have just realized it themselves over a lifetime of oppression of their own feelings.
Of course. That
this is not something they didn't want to share, but were just too afraid to share. And that's the problem we're living in this world right now, especially in Western culture. And like I said, in other cultures you had mentioned where you could be put to death for things like this, is that this is so shameful for so many of us that you have to realize that us telling you, or even if you discover it and we have to kind of come to that conversation because of it, that this is a shame for so many of us. And this is something that we know that if we share it, because of the world we live in, our expectation is that you're just going to want to divorce us, leave us, not want to ever speak to us again, race to these decisions of like, oh my God, you want to be with men or you want to be a woman. And sometimes that person in that conversation from both sides is ill-equipped and unprepared. Not everybody is a conversationalist. Not everybody can communicate their ideas in a way that the other person is not going to be triggered by it because they're hearing different words that they want to hear, or you don't know the answers to the questions they're asking you. Unfortunately, this is one of those things where I wouldn't want to just be a fly in the wall. I would want to be the person as a mediator to say, okay, wife, what are your concerns? And then like, okay, husband, what does this mean to you? And you need to be open to questions, open to knowing you don't have all the answers, but being open for the discovery of it. And if it's not for you, and if it like, Angie, if you said, well, you know what, Savannah, I'm this is really not for me. It's like, and I love you, but this really isn't for me. And that's, you have to be open to that as well. Because a lot of people stick with things because, well, I married him and I have to sacrifice. And everybody should be able to compromise without compromising.
Right. Yeah.
Because nobody should compromise their whole self for another human being.
But it's important that you can give room to someone, right? So I think like the ideal, like for me, would be like as long as you can have fun and play with it as a couple, because I think there was someone in my old job, and he's a guy. He's married to a woman. He's got kids. They've got children together. He's a very masculine alpha guy at work. Like, I mean, he is, even his face is square. Does that make sense? Like everything is like what a cartoon of a man would be is him, and he's really tall, very strong, very attractive, got a very strong, because he's so masculine, there's a very strong polarity. If you're a bit of a feminine woman, like I was just like, oh God, he's like, there's something really hot about him. But and then he would show, but because of how he did it. And I guess because he's very transparent, he doesn't care, he's just who he is. And I didn't know this for several months, but I think it was like a night out, and he was showing pictures of, they went to this party, him and his wife, and he was dressed as a Victorian woman, right? So like the big puffy dress. And turns out he's always dressing up, like when he's like, I think when he was like the man, when people get married, the groomsman, like you have maid of honor, but what's the one for the man?
The best man.
The best man. Everyone had to dress as it was like a women part, like awesome. A women thing, right? And because he's just owns, I was like, this is kind of really hot. Like it was kind of like turning me on. He's obviously nothing, and I'm not attracted to him, and really in that sense, it's not someone that I'm sort of thinking it, but he's really hot, right? He's like I wouldn't do anything. Like he's married, but I was just like it was hot. One, because he owned it.
Yes.
Two, because when he dresses up, he doesn't have a persona. I don't know if he cross dresses as a persona, like if he's got like a personality. I don't know, but he had tons of different. He'd always dress up as a different kind of woman, right?
So maybe it's more of a cosplay or crossplay.
Yeah, it's sort of a play, but you could tell he really loved it. Like he loves it. Like there was something like he does the makeup. Like there was no. He goes full on, and there was something, and I guess the reason why I'm talking about this is more that it is sort of almost how you own it because you can almost really use it to your advantage, right? It's like, well, this is how I am. I like to dress this way. I do this, or whatever, how you express it, right? And because to me it was like it did not take anything away from his. To be very traditional, it didn't take anything away from his manhood. If anything, it showed how confident he was. He was like, that's how I dressed, take it or leave it. There wasn't even that question. It wasn't even a question. And I think my worry would be, it's like, I think maybe what a lot of maybe women might feel, and I can't speak on behalf of everyone, but that's why if I was to speak for me, I guess it would be like, well, does that mean that they could fall in love with a man? Does that mean that I'm not providing everything they need in the bedroom? Or, would they leave me now that they're fully does that mean that they kind of want to be with someone who's, I don't know, like who's that would be like the sort of like, you know, the first impulsive, ignorant, like misinformed thoughts, right?
But those are so
they're
personal,
humans.
though.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a human reaction.
It's a human reaction,
that's
right?
okay, yeah.
And I think as long as as long as those things can be spoken about and talked about freely, like I think I would want for my partner, if he comes out to me and says, hey, I like to cross-dress as Julie, and I'm like, okay, well, I need to be able to ask my questions. Like, can we talk about this? And I just need to process and, you know, and then, you know, wear it and let's see. Because I think, especially like you said, with men with their muscular legs, right? When they if they were to wear a skirt, because I really enjoy men's legs. I like good legs on the man. So I know that when they're muscular, it looks even nicer if they have heels and a skirt, right? So it could be a lot of fun if she wanted to play, right? So I think it's in the approach, is like how you own it and how you sort of how you then eventually how you want to receive it and go, well, let's have fun with it. You're not going to change the person. You're not going to tell them not to do it. You can't stop someone from being who they are. So if you decide to stay, well, why not have fun with it?
Yeah,
you know,
own it too.
Own it too, and it's probably easier said than done.
It is.
Everyone's different, right? But I think that's kind of what I would hope. I would come to that place eventually. That's what I would want. But whether I would be able to or not, who knows? I don't know. Like I said, it's easier said than done, right?
it can be, but again, it's all about how you perceive yourself and your partner. And you said all those things that you said. Was like, I don't know what my partner's going to do. I'm afraid. There's very human reactions, and I'm not discounting those human reactions. What I do get concerned about is like, my religion says that you're an abomination.
Oh, yeah, no, but those
things are different. That's a whole different thing. So if you concentrate on your humanity and how it makes you feel, and like you said, have those conversations of like, well, you dress like this. You dress like a 12. And I don't. As a cis woman, I think I dress like a 6. Does that mean you want me to be a 12 like you're dressing? And there's every one of these little moments that you just mentioned can be such a conversation, because what people don't realize or remember that for me to feel like I am an 8, I have to dress like a 15. And that's only because I have masculine legs. I have big shoulders. I have a bald head. I have no ass. I mean, I have a little bit of an ass, but I have no hips. I have no boobs. And all these things are me overcoming my maleness in order to feel like I'm succeeding in my femaleness. So for me to like elevate my game to feel protected and blending in and passable and not being clocked, which again is a form of safety. If nobody notices you as a woman, nobody's going to be pointing to you as a man.
Yeah.
So just to finish that part of the story is that like to feel like you're competing with the feminine version of your partner should never be the case. If you want to do it, you're like, ooh, I want to try those thigh highs on too. Again, if you make it fun and you start owning your own femininity as a result, awesome.
So Savannah, is there like anything else that you wanted to add around, like, you know, the cross-dressing space?
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to say, and again, I love our conversation. I love where you're coming from. I love the fact that as a partner, you'd be like, let's just do this, and we're going to do it together, and we could do it at home. And like you're not saying, hey, let's only do it at home. Do it to the best of your ability to like. I mean, find that's space.
That's what I'm hoping I would say.
Yeah.
Like what I would say. I don't want to be like high and mighty and think I'm like, you know, this angel. But like this is what I'm hoping. This is what I would say. You know. That's
yeah. Well, it is a partnership. But sometimes some partners don't have, I'm gonna say, the fortitude, just aren't able to be that partner, right? To be that person to go out with you, let's say. And a lot of people I've talked to either, you know, say, well, okay, you do what you need to do, just stay safe, you know, dress conservative, you know, go do your thing. You know, I'll be here and just check in with me. There are partnerships like that where it doesn't have to be like a dynamic duo. Because again, you also have to remember, you know, sometimes it can't just be you and the partner, because we need community. Yes. Like even your partner needs community. Of course. If I reveal myself to you and you're like, okay, great, I'd love to ask you a bunch of questions, but I'm going to tell my girlfriend about this, because you need your own outlet. Like while you're struggling with me, with coming to terms with me, which again, at some point it won't be a struggle anymore. It'll just be a fact. But you can't just go back to the person that's angsting you to keep asking questions to try to quell your angst.
Right.
So you need an outside therapist or a friend or a consultant or somebody to confide in that's going to be supportive of both your needs, empathetic to who you are and what you're dealing with, as well as being the objective person to say, ask you those devil advocate questions like, well, what's wrong with Johnny dressing, in a dress? It's like try to bring everybody back to a balance point. That we're not all living in fear. We're not all making decisions on fear. We need to start making decisions on information, objectivity, our true hearts. And those, in fact, because everybody's got a different need. Like there are some people who only dress for the bedroom. There are some people who will never leave the house. There are some people who need a public side. So it's such a broad galaxy of what cross-dressing means that I can't answer the question for every one individual.
And that's why the space is different for you or someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to ever say my story is your story, but if you can say, wow, I can be like you in like how you represent yourself in whatever space I want to, that's all I can ask. And it's just a matter of like, I want everybody to know that we need two things to feel brave. We need a community, people who support us in whatever way, either a fellow cross-dressing person who says, I've lived that life, let me help you, let me be a mentor, or your partner who's like, I got your back, let's do this thing and we'll figure it out together, or just a cadre of friends who like say, yeah, we'll all go out together and you can be you and we'll be around you and protect you and kind of live and love that way. That's one thing. You need a community. Everybody needs community. And the second thing, everybody needs resource. Everybody needs relevant information to make decisions because the crossdresser may not know what the answer is because they're still too new to it. The partner may not know the information because they just found out 5 seconds ago. So the problem is you Google crossdresser, you're going to get a lot of erotica. You're going to get a lot of stuff on Amazon saying, Johnny's first time, forced feminization, how I made him a sissy. I mean, those are the things that people can see at first page and go, oh shit, this is not what I signed up for. So we have to have relevant, good, objective information that covers a broad spectrum, and just to realize that you can have fear, you can have doubt, you can have stress and concern about yourself as a crossdresser or your partner as a crossdresser and how it affects your lives and how do you keep each other safe. But it's really about getting the right information, getting the right community, because only those two things together can help you become more brave.
Of course, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for this, Savannah. So I am going to round up with the finishing thoughts. And these are the two questions that I ask all of my guests. And the first one is, what do you wish you'd known or learned at 18?
Besides maybe like putting more money into stocks, that would have been made me rich so I could buy all those clothes. No, I think if I were to go back to my 18-year-old self, who was still never shameful about cross-dressing, but just didn't know what to do, I would, go to that person, that version of myself and say, you're perfect the way you are, that your path is going to be a fantastic one. Just always hold the course and be confident and brave in who you are, and know that, you are perfect. That it's okay to have a feminine side and not get mired in religious dogma or social stigma and all those things. And I try not to hold ever key to those, but those always were influences to me growing up. So I wonder where I would be had I had that person tell me that early on. So that that'd be very important for me.
Yeah, we all need, a lot of us need to be able to see what's possible, right? So it does make a big difference when it's having representation almost, whether it's in your everyday life or in the media, but just having like, what are the things out there? What's possible? Who else feels the same as me, and, all of that stuff. So I think that's really important. And the second one is, what stuff do you not put up with anymore?
I'm pretty even keel, so I put up with a lot of things. But I think the one thing I will say specific to Savannah is I don't put up as much. I probably do a little still, but I don't put up with like people denying me my truth. Like I spent 1 to 15-year relationship going to the clubs in New York City. And this started this relationship. By the time it ended, I was pretty much back in the closet again. Because I allowed somebody else to dictate my truth.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so I would say that is something I don't do anymore. As like I'm the most visible I've ever been as Savannah now.
Yeah.
I'm way more visible now than I ever was in New York City, which is ironic. I was never going out in the daytime in New York, but now it's part of who I am and to be out there in the world. So I don't allow that fear to hold me back for too long. So I don't let that hold me back. I don't let other people dictate to me how I should live because I know I'm not hurting myself. I know I'm not hurting others. Other than your idea of me, maybe I'm hurting that. But yeah, I just try to like be braver and be more on Front Street and be like, no, this is who I am. Why do I have to curtail my life for somebody else?
Yeah, to make them feel more comfortable. Yeah. That's not what we're here for.
Right.
Absolutely. So I love this, Savannah. Thank you so much. Can you please tell us where can people find you? How do you want them to connect with you? Can they work with you? Like, give us all the good stuff.
Give you all the deets?
Yes.
All right, well, let's see if I can run these all down for you. Well, I do have 2 books that you can find on Amazon or on other digital download platforms. They're both called Living with Crossdressing. The first book is about relationships, and it was about defining a new normal is a subtitle. And then the second book is really more about the cross-dressing person themselves and giving them kind of those ideas of like your gender and your identity and your sexuality and why they are not all intrinsic to each other. They can live separate. That is actually called Discovering Your True Identity. So I have those 2 books out. I also co-host a podcast with my co-host, and awesome friend, Julie Rubenstein. It's called the Fox and the Phoenix podcast, which is all about demystifying the feminine cross-dressing experience. So we are coming up. I mean, we've already recorded 48 episodes.
Okay.
So we are scheduled out until like July. So that's exciting. So we do that on a weekly basis. Comes out every Wednesday, and we're preparing to continue. I mean, I'm looking to hit our 500th episode at some point. It's podcaster dream, right? So that is another way we can reach both the cross-dressing community, allies, partners, and just tell stories and be kind of like what you and I did today. Just kind of riff and just talk about the problems of the day and my experiences, and Julie plays devil advocate to say, well, what about this? What about the partner? So that's exciting. You can find me on social media at Savannah Hauk on Facebook, also on Instagram at Savannah Hauk. You can find Living with Crossdressing on Facebook. You can find the Fox and the Phoenix on Facebook as well on Instagram. And also, probably not by the time this episode airs with you, but I also did a TEDx talk, which I don't know about in Georgia, but like here in the States, it's like this is a dream come true for me to have Savannah on a platform of that scale.
Yeah.
And that would be coming out this summer as well.
Wow. Okay. And do you have a website?
I do. Thank you for reminding me. So my website is livingwithcrossdressing.com.
Cool. Perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much for this, Savannah. I look forward to see your TEDx talk coming out in the summer of 2021.
Yep.
And thank you so much for allowing me to ask all the questions and for being game today. And thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to meet you.
Oh, thank you so much. It was an amazing time with you today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com, or come and find me on Instagram at Tool for This Shit Podcast. See you next week, and until then,
Using health inappropriately.